Welcome. Does anyone have a question they came with that they'd like to get out of the way before we begin? And any questions that are asked now, I'll incorporate the answer into the talk.
Yeah. I was just wondering, before also, do you make a preparation before your speech or just let it go? It's the only thing I'm wondering.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else? Anil?
Role of contemplation while resting in awareness, if you can throw some light on that.
Contemplation of?
Two things I was focusing. One is in the question form.
One is
in the question form, for example, what is rest? What is awareness? What is resting in awareness? They are of similar nature. And everything is perfect. That was the second topic of contemplation. While resting in awareness, that has to be emphasized. I enjoyed both, so I thought you may comment on those.
I want to add to what he said yesterday. I realized that it's something slipped my mind, and you're always mentioning resting as awareness. And the key point for me is as awareness, because everything is rising and I don't describe anything, I don't react to it, but I don't rest as the thing itself. If the thought arises, then I don't react, but I still see it as different than me.
Mm-hmm.
So nothing happens, there's no reaction, but it's not, the thought is not me. It's just like I'm here, the thought is flying over somewhere, and there's still a dual state. And resting as awareness, resting as the thought itself, or as the feeling, is something that I have no idea of what to do.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. I'm all hooked up here. Okay. I'm wearing my tail today. My tail's on the front. It's all right to laugh here. Well, to begin with, no, I don't prepare what I'm going to say. Whatever is said is just an expression of dynamic benefit, of complete responsiveness to whatever is occurring right here. So there isn't any need to memorize, study, learn, make an outline, get nervous, wonder what everyone's going to think, wonder if it'll be liked, wondering whether it won't be liked. None of that's going on. But when I describe all those things, they're really familiar to all of us, because this is what we learn. We learn that in order to be smart and in order to speak well, then we have to study, and we have to learn a lot of things from outside ourselves and get them inside ourselves in order to be smart enough to think and speak. So you see, all of this activity is associated with the point of view and the concern and the belief system and assumption that there is a personal identity who can be doing all these things. So, the personal identity, it is just a conventional belief. That's all it is. The idea that someone exists in here is a conventional belief. It's an assumption. But when it's looked into, that assumption can't be really shown to exist. It cannot be found to exist in its own right. So we cannot find a personal identity anywhere that exists in its own right. And that is a huge relief. It's really a huge relief, because when we no longer have this hungry dog of personal identity to feed, then we can just relax. We can just really feel total relief. Because everything we already need is already present. So the thoughts we need to be thinking and the wisdom we need to have, what we need to know, the ability to speak about it, all of these things are already present. And so, what is it that states that we are somebody? And one of the things we could call that is the old mind, and how can we get familiar with the new mind? In other words, this new mind that's already present within us that doesn't need any props in order to identify itself. Well, first of all, we can look at the old mind, or the idea of having a personal identity, in a humorous way. So does everyone know what a pacifier is that a baby sucks on? It's that little thing. It looks like a plug, and it goes in the baby's mouth when they're crying, and then they suck on it and they feel better. So it's supposed to be kind of like sucking on the mother's breast or another nipple or something like that. And so when the baby sucks on this, our description of what's occurring, because of course from when we think of ourselves as a personal identity, we see everything within cause and effect. So we say, well, the baby's calming down because this is like a nipple. And so the personal identity is really like persisting and sucking on a pacifier. So at this point in human history, for people to continue to take themselves to have a personal identity, when it is so blatantly obvious, when looked at from any field of study, that there really is not a personal identity that can be found, is just persisting in a superstitious belief, really persisting in a primitive belief. And as this that we are, that has never been found to have a personal identity, is already present, we do not need any conditions or special circumstances in order to get familiar with that. In other words, we don't have to do anything special. Whatever is going on in our life right now is the perfect ground for the realization of our true being. Who we really are is the all-encompassing vast expanse of awareness, the pure view of awareness that includes all points of view. All the points of view of awareness are its dynamic energy and nothing else. So this dynamic energy of awareness, all the points of view within the pure view, have never been anything other than the pure view. They've never been anything other than primordially pure. And they're inseparable from awareness, like the color blue is inseparable from the sky, or like sunlight filling space is inseparable from space. There's no way to separate out those things, and such is the case with all of the points of view, the dynamic energy of awareness that occurs within the vast expanse of awareness. Now, we don't need to complicate who we are at all. That's it right there. The moment we start adding anything else in, then we get lost completely, maybe for a day, maybe for a week, maybe for a month, months, years, or even a lifetime. So if we complicate who we are unnecessarily, it's easy to get very lost. Now, when we just let that ease of being, that awareness that is at the root of everything, be as it is, without persisting in the need to describe everything that appears and attribute causes and conditions to it and attribute beliefs of time and location to it, then more and more we gain familiarity with what we are. We set aside the pacifier and we say, okay, I'm not going to suck on my personal identity anymore. I don't need this any longer. I'm more interested in the true nature of my being. So, at this time in human history, it's very important for us as human beings to make this shift and to simplify the instructions about it in a way that any human being can understand. Gone are the days where we need to cling to traditional beliefs or conventional beliefs of any kind. Everything about our world today is completely opened up and increasingly homogeneous. So this talk about all being one is exemplified more and more in many, many forms to us every single day through our ease of communication with the internet and telecommunications and with our ease of travel. So we really can see that we're connected as a human body now. And when we simplify the nature of our true being and specific instruction about gaining familiarity with that, then it becomes easier and easier for many, many people to realize that. And so this is what we find in the Great Freedom Teaching, that it really is easy. What is easy has become very overcomplicated, extremely overcomplicated, but it is totally easy. It is totally easy. All the while it's totally easy, no matter what kind of complication is thrust in to the matter of realizing our true nature. It remains easy. And to go about that requires only that we rest in awareness, rest as awareness repeatedly for short moments, many times, until it becomes obvious at all times, and waking, dreaming, and sleeping until we're able to let go of all the tethers of all the points of view, all the conventional beliefs, until we're able to see more and more that all of these points of view, no matter what they are, they're already resolved in basic space. They're already resolved in the basic space of awareness. They don't need to be purified or refined. They're already primordially pure. They're already perfectly refined. As they already are awareness, they've never been some impure state that is opposed to a pure state. So this is the meaning of the single non-dual expanse, that it has never been two, that all appearances that appear within that expanse are not two. Because of our habit of seeing things as two, when we begin to gain familiarity with awareness, it can be like a tiger watching its prey. It's our awareness, and we're watching this foe, or this thing we want to get and destroy somehow. And that's just the way it is in the beginning for most people. But the more we rest as awareness, the less it will seem that there are two. And this will happen organically without thinking about it. It'll just naturally be the case that this becomes more and more obvious to you, that there are not two. And as awareness intensifies this decisive experience of awareness that really isn't an experience, then in that a subtle quality of awareness develops in all appearances, no matter what's happening. And that subtle quality then becomes blazingly obvious. So you see, the process is very simple. It doesn't need to be understood. We can't think our way into it. We can't do anything. We can't engage in any specific set of practices that are going to more greatly enhance that than any other condition in our lives. So this is very, very important, because some of us believe now, or we may have believed, that special conditions are required. However, they're not required. If they were required, that would make the clear light of timeless wisdom awareness conditional and dependent upon something else. So how could that be? As there only is the clear light of timeless wisdom awareness, how could it be dependent on anything? There's nothing for it to be dependent on. Now, when we begin to rest as awareness, the need to feed the self-identity just automatically loosens up. We don't need to think about the self-identity. We don't need to try to clobber it over the head or take it apart, annihilate it, get rid of it, make this naughty presence go away. We don't need to do any of that. These are just all ways of persisting in dualistic perceiving, or what we in the Great Freedom Teaching we just say point of viewing. The point of view of being somebody and all other points of view within awareness are equal. So there isn't a special individual who has a special kind of point of view status that acts as a hard drive or storage device for all the other points of view. There's no intermediary in there anywhere. There's only awareness and all its own self-appearing and self-sounding points of view. There's never been anything else. So this can be a great relief to us if we're ready. If we're ready, that means that we're open-minded enough to be able to set aside all the points of view we have about what's necessary to realize who we are. That's all being ready is. And if we're not ready, then that's just the way that is too. But if we are ready, realizing who we are is a very, very simple matter. When we believe that we have a self-identity, then all these beautiful functions of our body are lost in dealing with that self-identity. All of the functioning of our body, every single thing about the body down to its smallest particle is awareness imbued. It's never been anything other than that. So that by which we sense, feel, emotions, think, all of that is awareness and nothing else. Without awareness, we wouldn't know that we are. So when we gain familiarity with awareness, the way in which we perceive the world gradually changes. Once in a while, it'll shift for someone very suddenly and remain permanent from that moment on, but that's exceedingly rare, so don't count on it. Gain familiarity with awareness, and it's guaranteed that the swift accomplishment of that will come about through resting as awareness. There's nothing to contemplate within awareness because everything is awareness itself. So the answers to your questions, say that question occurs to you as a point of view, that isn't something that needs to be focused on. Rather, just in that question appearing, the answer will also appear without contemplating it or anything else. So this is the distinction between sublime knowing, or the all-knowingness of the clear light of wisdom awareness, and ordinary knowing. Ordinary knowing needs to learn something. The all-knowingness, the sublime knowing, is already all-knowing. There's no learner or learned. Everything is already contained. And this, from what I've described, you can see is easy to understand. If all points of view are timelessly within awareness, that means that all points of view of past, present, and future are occurring right here. And so everything that has ever been known in the past is known now and will be known in the future, so to speak. It's all known right now. So, the easy way is to just rest as awareness and see what comes about. Anything that you want to understand will be best understood by resting as awareness. And this is very simple and it's very, very clear. Resting as awareness does not mean getting into a state. A state is identifying timeless awareness as something and then trying to stay in that something. And that's just an anomaly of point of view. It's not realization of timeless awareness. In timeless awareness, there are no extremes. There's no position or frame of reference anywhere that needs to be adopted, no matter what it is. So we're not trying to stay in stillness, and we're not trying to stay in the feeling of being, and we're not trying to live in an impersonal way. You see, as soon as we say that we're doing something, there's a doer who's doing something. But if we take any of these terms, living in an impersonal way, stillness, the feeling of being, what do we need to even experience those terms? Awareness. So you see, awareness is what we want to get familiar with. We don't want to get familiar with a state, no matter how much better it may seem than the current points of view we have. Because sometimes these states, they can seem a lot better than the current points of view we have. If we can get into a state of stillness or emptiness or non-conceptuality or bliss or emptiness, whatever it is, and stay there, it might feel pretty good compared to what we've had going on. But all these are just other points of view. They're just, like I said, an anomaly of point of view. They're not complete freedom, the complete timeless freedom of living as all points of view with no need to separate out from anything. When we gain familiarity with awareness, that by which we are self-aware, then everything about us starts to become amusing. We go from thinking about our thoughts and emotions as enemies to seeing that they've never been enemies. They've always been allies. They're not something that we have to beat off with a stick or try to get away from or try to change into some other better thoughts or some other better emotions. All we need to do is rest as awareness and see that these descriptions, these labels that are applied to everything, that they've never been anything. Just like the personal identity can't be found to exist, neither can an authentic underlying basis for a label, any label. There's nothing there to apply it to. There's only the pure space of timeless awareness and nothing else. And many people can understand this today. We can understand this easily because we have these incredible machines. We show ourselves all the time that nothing exists. We throw it under an electron microscope, anything, personal identity, anything that's labeled tangible or intangible. Put it under an electron microscope, throw it in a particle accelerator, and what do we see? There's nothing there. There's nothing but space. So why persist in a primitive superstition about ourselves as divided and separated out and having a personal identity? When there's a personal identity, we're automatically at war. We're at war within ourselves and we're at war with other beings because we're constantly involved in the grind of proving ourselves to be. And we substantialize ourselves with points of view that we relate back to this personal identity. And then we compete with others and try to show our abilities to them through all these points of view, like this is me, I'm my points of view. In order to know you, I have to know your points of view. And, there's always this separation because you've got your identity, I've got mine, and yours will never be good enough for mine, so, and this is going on within ourselves and within each of us as people, too. How does it go on within us? It goes on within us because we're at war with our thoughts and emotions. We're saying, oh, I've got to have more positive thoughts. I've got to have more positive emotions. And I've got to get rid of the negative ones. There's nothing that needs to be done about naturally self-appearing appearances of awareness. Nothing needs to be done about them, no matter what their labels are. All we really need to do is get familiar with the reality that they are the basic space of awareness and nothing else. They've always been pure from the beginningless beginning. There isn't anything special that a label imputes about anything. So when we rest as awareness and we just allow everything to be as it is, all the thoughts, all the emotions, all the experiences, then more and more we realize what wisdom is. The clear light of wisdom begins to dawn, and we can start to laugh at ourselves for taking ourselves so seriously. And also, we have tremendous compassion that arises. So it's not like we're getting into some kind of a state that's disconnected or doesn't have any feeling tone at all. We have a tremendous warmth of compassion that appears for ourselves and the way we've fooled ourselves throughout our lives by thinking that all our thoughts and emotions mean something. And then we also, with that self-compassion, that self-kindness, that self-love that is the only ultimate and true self-kindness and self-love and self-compassion, we then instantaneously have compassion for everyone else because we know everyone else is in the same boat. And so no longer are we in this bipartisan positioning with everyone else where we're saying, oh, my points of view are the right points of view and yours aren't. Because, we will never meet anyone who has points of view that match ours. And we'll never be able to make the world into a place where all the points of view match each other and all the beings. That would be like a land of robots, that would be a machine-like existence. So, when we're sucking on our pacifier personal identity, that is a machine-like existence because we're spending our whole life like a robot, trying to have good thoughts and good emotions and get rid of the bad thoughts and bad emotions. And that leads nowhere. We might get what we consider to be better thoughts and emotions. There are people in this room who, of course, done that through all kinds of methods and practices. However, that isn't freedom. It's not freedom. And getting into a state isn't freedom either. So, everything is totally equal. Well, everything is totally equal. So, when you have a thought that you consider to be such a nasty little lewd thought that it couldn't possibly be anything as wonderful as timeless awareness, just stop. And, you feel the impulse to go off with, oh, something's wrong with me. I shouldn't be living in this ashram because I'm not holy enough, or I shouldn't even be trying to live as awareness because I'm still having these lewd thoughts, whatever they are. Just know that all of these, through the dynamic energy of awareness, these thoughts and emotions points of view have never occurred to anyone. There's no one for them to occur to. There's only awareness inclusive of all points of view, an entirely spontaneous, delicious happening that is like a celebration and a festival of being. So this entire expanse is entirely wholly positive, benevolent, and fun. It's not somber, sullen, silent, celibate, you know. I mean, you can take on all these ways of life if you want to, but they have nothing whatsoever to do with realizing awareness. Whatever your conditions are the perfect conditions for realizing awareness. There's nothing special that's required. And even if all kinds of methods and practices are engaged in attempting to lead to a destination of timeless awareness, first of all, it's very likely that that'll ever be realized while engaging in methods and practices. But if it is realized fully, if it is full-blown, then it will be realized that the methods and practices weren't necessary. The methods and practices, we're all involved in methods and practices, no matter what they are, just as living human beings. However we're living our life, it's a method and a practice. It's ways and means of living life. And whatever those ways and means are, and whatever those methods and practices are, they do not need to change. If there are things you want to change about yourself, things that you think are negative behaviors or faults that you want to exhaust, all faults are already exhausted in forever stainless, flawless awareness. So the surefire way of exhausting faults and perfecting qualities occurs simultaneously in resting as awareness. Any fault you have will be completely gone beyond. And rather than that fault being present, what will be present is a magnificent display of wisdom, of a wisdom body, a wisdom speaker, a great wisdom mind and great wisdom qualities and activities that don't need to attach to a bunch of conventions to describe itself. So this is the choice we have, you know, when we believe that we're a personal identity, then what are the thoughts about? They're about the personal identity and how to keep it safe, comfortable, happy, and get through life somehow. How to surround itself with everything it needs in order to get whatever that is. And then the emotions are about that too. If there are negative emotions, then we usually say, well, I'm having these negative emotions because it's somebody else's fault. It's either somebody else's fault or it's the fault of one of society's institutions or whatever they are. And then our senses, with our eyes, we're looking out at the world, and everything we see, we're describing in some way. So we see people and we identify them by their characteristics, and we describe their characteristics: black skin, white skin, yellow skin, blue eyes, brown eyes, black eyes, hazel eyes, whatever it might be. And we're all caught up in the descriptions about everything. So this is the way that our eyes are seeing. Our awareness-imbued eyes are seeing differences everywhere, are seeing all these characteristics by which everyone is taken to be somebody. This one's pretty, that one's ugly, that one I'm not even going to look at because they're too old now. You know, they're over the hill, so they're invisible, they're out of the way. We don't have to deal with them anymore because they aren't pretty enough to fit in with the rest of us, you know. And these are ways we actually are. We actually are. Our old people become invisible. Increasingly in all cultures, this is the case. Over the hill, invisible at some point. Nobody wants to have anything to do with them because they don't have all these operating qualities of the personal identity that are so worshipped. And so this is the way we're seeing. And then we see everything in terms of good and bad and how it relates to us and can feed our personal identity. And then with the other senses too, we do the same thing. We only want to touch pleasant things and hear pleasant things and smell pleasant things and taste pleasant things that all relate to us. So we want pleasure. We want pleasure through all our senses. We want our senses just filled with pleasure. And that's great, but if you want your senses filled with pleasure, how about the ultimate pleasure? The ultimate pleasure is the desireless desire of completely open, pure space, the clear light of wisdom that is the basis of every single perception, every single point of view that does not need to change in any way whatsoever for your timeless freedom to be guaranteed. And resting as awareness repeatedly for short moments, many times it becomes automatic just through the acknowledgement of it. The personal identity has become automatic just through the acknowledgement of it. So this is a very simple, straightforward human matter. Just through the acknowledgement of it, the wisdom identity becomes more and more obvious. Our senses aren't any longer lost in all this way of seeing that is an attempt to feed the personal identity. Instead, as we relax more and more in the ease of being, that complete relaxation of awareness that is at the root of every perception, we start to look out and we don't even know how it's happened. But everybody starts to look a lot better. And we can't really say when it happened or how it happened, but wow, everyone starts to look a lot better. And all these fixed ideas we have about how solid and stable our own personal identity is and how solid and stable other people are, and our need to show our abilities and compete with everyone else, it just naturally slips away without doing anything but resting as awareness. So this is the complete exhaustion of faults and perfecting of qualities that occurs simultaneously without doing anything. And then the thoughts shift, the thoughts shift gradually too. Instead of all this obsessive thinking about me, my stuff, how am I going to live, how am I going to die, who am I going to try to surround myself with so I can feel good, and all of that, the attachment to all these things that are considered to be important, it just loosens up. It really loosens up. We still love everyone who's close to us, but we don't desperately need them in order to consider ourselves to be somebody or to be happy. And our thinking becomes much more in our emotions too, in a very natural way, involved in what will be of benefit to everyone. So rather than just thinking about ourselves and what will benefit us, through the ultimate self-benefit of resting as awareness, we see what tremendous benefit that is to ourselves, and we automatically want to be of benefit to others without even thinking about it. So we, instead of thinking about ourselves all the time, more and more we're just seeing the suffering, of everyone, and how the suffering of everyone is due to this matter of clinging to a personal identity and taking it to be real. And we feel such connection and love and compassion with everyone when we realize that. So then we can't help but think about all these things that make us suffer in our daily lives, like not having clean water to drink or not having food to eat. You see, when people are in a state, they don't think about these things because they're too busy with the state. But going beyond all states is the clear light of timeless wisdom awareness. This is the reality of the greatest powers that any human being can have. The greatest powers that any human being can have are in the timeless wisdom of open and complete awareness, the clear light of awareness, the perfectly clear light of awareness. The powers are not in states. A state is just a point of view. When we find ourselves thinking and then also having our emotions related to the well-being of everyone, that's just, a very wonderful way to be. It's a very wonderful way to be. Nothing special is needed. You see, if we try to contrive specialized circumstances, then we won't realize that our already present points of view, whatever they are equal. They're completely equal. They don't need to change. Who we are isn't dependent on anything. We all know this already. Everything that's being said here, even if you've never heard it before, there may be a ring of truth. And if there isn't a ring of truth or a big gong of truth, that's okay. You're just not ready for this. That's okay. It doesn't really mean anything. This is a point in human history where there are many people who are open enough to realize this, to set aside the personal identity, just rest as awareness without complicating matters and coming in to the full benefit of wisdom power. There are many people all over the globe today I meet who are ready, who don't need to hold so tightly to all the conventions. They're all being dissolved. All the conventions are being dissolved in the internet. Have you noticed that? This is the evidence we've created that everything's always resolving in basic space. It's on the internet. Many people have a very loose way of being with identity. People will have 10 or 12 different identities. So you see, they're not even so longer fixed to just one personal identity. Now they've got a whole bunch. I wouldn't suggest it, but it's good in this way. It shows us how fluid identity is, that it's all made up. It's a fiction. It's just like reading a science fiction book. It's just all made up. It really doesn't mean anything. We don't have to persist in a make-believe existence. All appearances within us are outside us, and our appearance too. It's like a mirage. It's like a hologram. And just like we wouldn't seek anything in a hologram or a mirage to give us satisfaction or fulfillment, why seek anything in appearances? They're all vivid appearances of emptiness, vivid appearances of the basic space of awareness and nothing else. Whether you're facing the solution of the latest problem in string theory or quantum physics, or you simply want to bake a better loaf of bread, rest is awareness, and there'll be something there that's really incredible without thinking about anything. Anyone may ask a question if you'd like.
Thank you. What about preliminary practices and purification, which are sort of conventional ways in order to arrive at this state? Would you say they're not necessary?
I would say they're not necessary. all the preliminary practices have really already occurred. So just by taking a personal identity to be real.
But I'm thinking of Shivananda, who did tapas for 10 years, and Buddha, who had many lives before this, his last life, and then again he had intense tapas for 10, 12 years.
Were you there?
Was I there? Well, according to you, I was. If space, yeah.
Well, the point is, why keep referencing your own personal identity to the seeming personal identity of an historical figure? Keep the focus on yourself, rest as awareness, and you'll find out everything you need to know, both about yourself, Lord Shivananda, and Lord Buddha. So the things that we describe about historical figures are usually described through dualistic perception. So, when we just stop and rest as awareness, we may find that all these points of view, like preliminary practice, tapas, reincarnation, karma, all these things, we may just see that they're more points of view. They're just the points of view of a particular era that have been carried over to the present. However, the stainless, flawless knower that is forever so, that we become familiar with in resting as awareness, understands everything completely.
May I put it another way? What gets in the way of realizing that then?
What, pardon?
What gets in the way of realizing that stainless, pure awareness?
Nothing's ever in the way of it, ultimately. However, as long as we take ourselves to be a personal identity, then who's engaged in preliminary practices that are leading somewhere, then we have a destination and someone going there. So we have a destination of wherever we think we're going, and we have a personal identity headed towards that destination.
So just our personal identity.
That's it. Because all the points, once we decide on the point of view of a personal identity, then everything relates back to that. All methods and practices, whether they're spiritual methods and practices or they're non-spiritual methods and practices. But why not cut right to the root and rest in the timeless equanimity of everything that is, and then revisit the teachings of Buddha or anyone else and see what they say? This is really what we need at this point in time. And even if you have been doing practices forever and you love your practices and think they're really fun to do, you enjoy them, they're just part of your life, you've been living this way for who knows how long, go ahead and continue with whatever they are, but don't continue with the point of view that they're leading somewhere. Complete freedom is already fully alive as any method and practice, whether it's spiritual or non-spiritual. All your thoughts, your spiritual thoughts, are as timelessly free as your non-spiritual thoughts. When you just rest as awareness, that becomes more and more obvious. There are many, many different ways of realizing who we are. And so when we look at all the different ways of realizing who we are, it's really good to choose one that has worked for the most people, because then we have the evidence that it really works. So this simple practice, it's like a golden thread that runs through all of humankind. Rest as awareness for short moments, repeated many times, without describing anything that appears, without seeking anything in anything that appears. It's this process of description and seeking in relation to all appearances that takes the vitality out of life, takes the wisdom out of life. I'm not saying give up spiritual practices or methods. I'm just saying that the spiritual and the non-spiritual are equal.
Do you feel animals are also living in this kind of awareness field, same basic?
One of my favorite topics. As everything is awareness, animals, of course, are awareness too. They're the dynamic energy of awareness, making them awareness. Now, of course, we're animals too. We're just the human animal. So the human animal has self-awareness. It's an animal that can identify itself in one of two ways, either as the personal identity or as the wisdom identity. So this is the self-awareness choice, the very simple and most important choice of every human being. Now, with an animal, another kind of animal, like a four-legged, I have these two little dogs, Rudy Kazootie and Baby Kazootie. They're Boston Terriers, and they're those little black and white dogs. They weigh about 19 pounds, and they have the ears that stick straight up. And they have a little square head and a very short tail. Now, that's my description of them. They never once have had the thought, I'm a dog, I'm a Boston Terrier, I have little ears that stick up, I'm black and white, I'm so cute. I'm beside myself with cuteness. You know, they've never taken themselves to be anything. And they're not thinking, oh, I just barked, will people like me now? Or I'm going to try to never bark again because then nobody will like me. So, you know, they never take themselves to be anything. And anything that appears, they don't relate it to a self-identity within themselves. And so, you know, they don't have any worries or concerns. They're spontaneous expressions of totally genuine being. They don't have thoughts like, oh, you know, I wish they'd give me better dog food, or where's my Innova? I don't want this Purina dog chow anymore. I want an upgrade, do a better kind of kibble. And they're not thinking, am I going to have a place to live tomorrow or next week? Can they pay the rent or pay the mortgage payment? So you see, the spontaneous nature of being such that it is totally timelessly free. But once we have a personal identity and we try to uphold that personal identity, whether it's in a non-spiritual way or a spiritual way, we've still got a personal identity going. And in that is a tremendous sense of arrogance about keeping that personal identity in place. So then, you know, even if we hear the truth ringing in everything and see it ringing in everything, just like it's occurring all the time anyway, then that truth being heard is like pouring water on an iron ball. You know, there's no way for water to penetrate an iron ball. So when we just rest in that personal identity and all the things it's doing, it just loosens up. And then, like the four-leggeds were easier to get along with. We can get along with ourselves, within ourselves, and we can get along with each other.
does enlightenment, as the term is used in modern times, does that point to a state or to something you're describing now in your talk?
Oh, well, enlightenment is described in many, many, many ways, increasingly so with the internet and the proliferation of books about the topic. However, there are very few books that actually describe the enlightenment of the ancients. So there are very, very few wisdom texts that actually describe what that is and also provide the unerring instruction about its realization. What has been described as enlightenment, we don't use that word here, the E word in the Great Freedom Teaching. We don't use it because it has been tarnished by so many misinterpretations. And once we call it enlightenment, then it means it belongs to somebody, like a tradition or an historical figure or a country or something like that. So there's too much misunderstanding about what the word is to use it or for it to be meaningful to people in a mass way. So we just say awareness, timeless wisdom awareness. When people rest as awareness, their life will become better. And to the degree that they rest as awareness, their life will become a lot better. And to the degree that they rest as awareness, these wisdom qualities and activities of potent benefit will become obvious. So what might have been called complete enlightenment or full enlightenment, it's always only been the potent benefit, the tremendous power and force of the wisdom body. The wisdom body is the infinite expanse of timeless wisdom awareness, and that's what we are. So when we realize that, then these qualities and activities, the speech, the mind, the body itself, are an expression of that. That wisdom mind is that which sees everything as equal. There's only equalness and evenness everywhere. The spiritual and the non-spiritual are not two. So the holiest thought you've ever had, the most sacred thought you've ever had, and the most lewd are timelessly equal. There's no need to set up all these categories of good and bad. If we're setting up categories of good and bad, there's no freedom. None. What I see around the world is that there are many people opening up to living as the wisdom body and being expressions of tremendous benefit, that this just naturally occurs. And these people will be our leaders. Increasingly, these people will be our leaders. The shift to the new mind is not only a wisdom imperative, it's an evolutionary imperative. So whether the species continues on or not, in the process of it continuing on or not, there will arise a leadership that is endowed with this timeless quality that has been marginalized into something spiritual. We are who we are as human beings, and to put who we are in any specific category and say it belongs there, it just cuts people off from the information about its unerring realization. There's nothing worth holding on to. No point of view is worth holding on to. Whoever we are, we like our own points of view. Well, go right ahead and like your own points of view. Just rest as awareness while you're enjoying your own points of view, whatever they are. And you'll learn something about them that is really precious and timeless. You know, I know some crazy Tibetan yogis who don't have any idea about anything and who have magnificent powers of great benefit. And so, you know, I've known these people for some time, and one of their characteristics is that they're happy. You know, they're totally filled with joy, and anything goes. You know, absolutely anything goes. Well, now, when I'm traveling around the world, I look out and I see the audience filled with crazy Tibetan yogis. It's spreading everywhere like a fever that cannot be controlled. Now, one of the crazy Tibetan yogis I know isn't even a Tibetan. She's an American woman. And her name is Lena, and she's about my age. However, about 33 years ago, she went to live with the crazy Tibetan yogis when she was a young American woman. And so, you know, one of their things, of course, is that everything is equal and to rest imperturbably, just what's being taught here. And so she didn't know any Tibetan, and she was trying to learn Tibetan, and they were teaching her. So she said, oh, you know, I need to get some bread. Tell me the Tibetan word for bread. And so they would give her the Tibetan word for penis. And then she would go to the store thinking that she was asking for bread. So you see, this is how the confines of points of view are shattered. This is true skillful means.
High quality.
Pardon?
Make sure to preface it with high quality.
Or I'd like some brown. Or white or whatever. Anyway, that's enough for today.